Okay, we're on chapter 19, Sif Hey. Introduction. The sixth bracha of Shemona Esrei begins with Baruch Aleinu. It's a prayer for bountiful harvest and ample rainfall for the earth and its inhabitants. Therefore, when the season for rain arrives, we add a special prayer for dew and rain. Says the Kitzur, we begin to say telematter in the Shemona Esrei of Ma'ariv of the 60th day after the Tishrei season, which is the fall, the season of fall, which comes out to the 4th or the 5th of December, and it is said until the first day of Pesach. Now, actually, nowadays it's the 5th or 6th of September, because basically what happens is every 100 years, there's different ways to measure to determine when the season is. But as far as the halachic, even within halacha, there's different opinions, and we follow. It's called Tkufas Shmuel and Tkufas Rabbi. We follow different opinions for different considerations. But as far as this is concerned, we're following an exact calculation for when the fall season begin halachically, and 60 days later we begin saying we're saying telematter. Now, in the secular solar calendar is built in a way that every 4 years is a leap year. So that sort of brings us, because really, essentially the idea is that a year for the sun to make a complete orbit is 365 and a quarter days. So we only have 365 days in a year, and every 4 years we add February 29th, we add another day to sort of catch up with the sun. Now the problem is that it's actually a little bit less than 365 and a quarter. So to counter that, what the secular calendar has done is that every century, with the exception of a century divisible by 4, we skip a leap year. So the year 1900, even though it was the 4th year, so it was, so to speak, it was time for that to be a February 29th, but because it was the century which is not divisible by 4, so there was no February 29th in the year 1900, which is why all the halachic books that were published, which were written before the year 1900, say that you start saying telematter on the 4th or 5th of December, and those books which were written after 1900 say that you start on the 5th or 6th of December, because basically we've pushed it off a day by missing the leap year of 1900. Now in the year 2000, because it was a century divisible by 4, there was a leap year, and therefore we didn't fall back. But then by the year 2100, it's then going to change for V'sein telematter to be on the 6th or the 7th of December. It's going to be pushed up another day. All right, so that's essentially what it says here in the footnote. The author's dates were only valid until the year 1899. From 1900 until 2100, telematter has begun on December 5th and December 6th. Now, what does it depend on? Why is it the 4th or the 5th, or the 5th or the 6th? What are the two possible dates? So again, it depends on the same thing. On the year leading up to a secular leap year, to a solar leap year, right? So now you're already 3/4 of a day behind schedule. So the tkufa, the fall the season, is going to begin 1 day later in the calendar, and therefore we're going to start saying we're saying telematter 1 day later in the calendar. So basically, what are we now? We're 2021. So 2020 was a leap year? Was not a leap year? When was the last leap year?
I think it was 2020.
Let's look it up right now. February 29th, 2020. Let's see. Saturday, February 29th, leap day 2020, right? So in the December of 2019, we would have started saying the same telematter. That's 2 months before, yeah? 2 months before the leap day. We would have started saying the same telematter not on December 5th, but on December 6th. Now, just to make the cheshbon tiny little bit more confusing, when we say we start saying the same telematter on December 5th or December 6th, we mean Ma'ariv of that day, which is in our consciousness the day before. So on the calendar, right, on December 4th in the evening, you start saying the same telematter because now halachically it's already December 5th. And similarly, on the before a leap year, you start saying it on Ma'ariv of December 5th because now halachically it is December 6th. Now, the reason so far, any questions so far?
Nope.
Wow. Pretty cool. You with us, David Yehuda?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Now, why do we start saying telematter on the 60th day of the Tkufa? So the reason is because in Bavel, which is where most of the Jews in the diaspora lived at the time, that was when they needed rain. That was when the rain season started. Now, as much as there's room for discussion, in practice, this custom spread that in the entire world outside of Israel, that's when we start saying the same telematter. Not only in places like America, where the season for rain may be a few weeks earlier than that, but even in places in the southern hemisphere, Australia, South Africa, Argentina, etc., where it's completely off the wrong time of the year, in practice, the minhag is to say the same telematter. Now, all of this is relevant to know Lamaisa because basically, as we're going to see in the next Sif and Sif Vav, that if a person made a mistake and requested rain at the wrong time, or neglected to request rain at the time that he was supposed to, so then he has to repeat the bracha, and in certain instances has to repeat the entire Amida. But you're only going to have to repeat the Amida if it's clear cut that at your locale and at that date you were supposed to say it or supposed to not say it. But if there is room for a different opinion, so let's say if a person forgot to say the same telematter today if a person did say the same telematter today in Australia, so then he wouldn't, I think he would not have to repeat the Amida because there's certainly room to suggest that was indeed the appropriate thing for him to do. In America, it's less extreme, but there could also be, like we start saying on the 60th day. Now, I don't know exactly, I'm not a farmer, but I would imagine that the season for rain in this country is earlier than 60 days after the fall season begins. And therefore, arguably, if somebody for some reason said the same telematter by mistake on day 30 of the Tkufa, then we may say that he does not have to repeat the Amida. Of course, in Israel, famously, they start saying the same telematter on Zayin Cheshvan, 2 weeks after Sukkot, which is when the last of the Jews would have been able to get back to his house all the way at the far end of the kingdom. And of course, if somebody is traveling from Israel to the diaspora, vice versa, Steve, you and I had that 2 years ago. We were both in Israel at that time between Cheshvan and December. And so there's different opinions and whatever, every case has to be judged separately. Okay. Sivav. If you erred and did not say telematter, if you remembered before ending the bracha of V'varich Hashanim, so then before the close of the bracha, you say the same telematter the bracha pnei adama v'sabeinu and conclude the bracha properly. So you insert it right over there. If you do not remember until having completed the bracha, so now we have to add in one thing, because here, according to Alter Rebbe, if you concluded the bracha, if you're looking in your siddur, if you concluded the bracha Mevarich Hashanim, but you did not yet commence the next bracha, you did not yet say the word Tekah from the next bracha, then you could say it right there in between those two brachas. Okay, what if you missed that? If you did not remember until already starting the next bracha, so then continue on, and in the bracha of Shema Keleinu, after the words Reikam Al Tishvenu, do not turn us away empty-handed, then you say V'sein Talamot L'Vracha Ki Ata Shemeh Tfilas Kol Peh, and even if you did not remember then, but only after you said Baruch Ato, as long as you have not yet said Hashem, you may say V'sein Talamot L'Vracha and go back Ki Ata Shemeh. So as long as you have not said the name of Hashem and the conclusion of the bracha of Shemeh Tfilah, you can say it right then. And again, according to the Alter Rebbe, even if you did finish the bracha, if you did not yet start the next bracha of Ritzei, then you could say it right there as well. But if you did not realize, if you got to add telematter until after you completed the bracha of Shemay Tefillah, then you must, or according to Alter Rebbe, until after you started the bracha of Ritzei, then you must go back and begin Baruch Aleinu and say it then. And if you do not remember until you're right there, if you did not remember until you said the last verse of the end of Shemona Esrei, Yil Ratzain, then you must go back to the beginning of the Amida. And 1 second. Okay, is that clear so far?
Yep.
Okay. When it says you must go back, if you finish, meaning if you already stepped back, you took one step back, then you need to go back to the beginning of the Amida. But if you haven't yet taken a step back, then you don't need to go back to the beginning of the Amida. You just go back till Baruch Aleinu. Okay, now here, Sivav number 6, we've been talking about if you forgot to mention rain in the winter. Now Siv Zayin is the reverse. Ta bakayitz, if you're during the summer and he by mistake did say the same telematter, then you must go back to the beginning and say Baruch Aleinu. It doesn't help that you, even if you remember right away, you don't go back 2 words, you go back to the beginning of that bracha. And if you do not realize that you had added the same telematter until after you said the verse you must go back to the beginning of the Amida. It's common that this could happen because when you start saying the same telematter, so it's the Ma'ariv of December 5th or 6th, whatever day it is, and everybody announces and reminds each other, the same telematter, don't forget. But on the reverse, it's just the Ma'ariv of the first night of Chol HaMoed Pesach, and it's usually not made into a major deal. And I don't know, in my experience, it's sort of easier to forget or more important to remind people. Maybe it's just I had a personal experience when I was a child. I don't remember if I was 10, 11, 12, maybe even 13, that I just didn't know that we were saying, I was continued saying the same telematter until a few days after Pesach, and I realized that, I'd been saying it wrong. Maybe they didn't announce it at Ma'ariv, or maybe I had missed Ma'ariv that night, and or missed out with the minyan, whatever it was, and it's just skipped my attention. Anyway, okay. Now, till now we've spoken about if you said the same telematter at the wrong time or didn't say it at the wrong time, and also last week we learned about Mashiv Aruch. If you didn't say it, what if you don't know? What if you're not sure? If you're in doubt about whether you added Mashiv Aruch or not, and so now we're going back to Mashiv Aruch. He's not yet talking about the same telematter. If your person is not sure whether he added Mashiv Aruch, so if 30 days have passed, in other words, that you've already said Shemona Esrei 90 times properly, so now it can be assumed that you prayed and added Mashiv Aruch by virtue of habit. But if the doubt arose within or before the 30 days elapsed, you are required to repeat the Amida. The same rule applies to telematter. If the doubt arose after you already prayed 90 Shemona Esrei properly, we presume that now too you prayed properly, but before 30 days, you must repeat the Amida. Now, the question is, it's interesting that he just says, 90 prayers. Now, the truth is, as far as Mashiv Aruch is concerned, in 30 days, you have more than 90 prayers because you have a number of Shabbosos, where you add a musaf. You also have it Turish Chodesh, where you add musaf. So you've technically said it closer to 95 times. Yeah. And similarly, you say in telematter is the opposite is true, that even though you've said it for 30 days, but on Shabbos you don't say it. And so you've it's less than 90 times saying the same telematter. Nevertheless, 30 days is 30 days. And in some poskim they say so in this edition of the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, he says that if you look at the words of the Alter Rebbe, it's clear that what matters is not it's 30 days, not 90 tefillas. I didn't look it up the Alter Rebbe to see that's what he says. Now, some poskim talk about another idea that what you could do is on day one, just sit down in your place and just say 30 times, 90 times. You say it 90 times, or say it 90 times, and that way, instead of having to wait a month, you're covered. Now, so there's discussion amongst poskim whether or not that works, whether or not it's appropriate to do that. In practice, certainly in Chabad, I have not seen that practice observed. And perhaps, again, I didn't look this up, perhaps according to Alter Rebbe, it doesn't work properly. But either way, if a person is in doubt within 30 days, he has to repeat. After 30 days, he doesn't. Of course, if a person sees that even after 90 days, he's still habituated to the old way, then it doesn't work. But usually after 30 days, we assume that you are habituated unless you know otherwise. And of course, then the OCD question becomes, well, what does doubt mean? Do you have to be 100% sure that you said it right? What if I'm 95% sure? Or does doubt mean only 50-50? And ask your local competent, orthodox, knowledgeable OCD rabbi. Okay. Siftes. Okay. In the Amida of, one second. In the Amida of Shabbos and Yom Tov, there are only 7 brachas. The weekday Amidas have 19 brachas, the 3 middle and the 3 first and the 3 last, which are the same on Shabbos and in the weekday. On Shabbos and Yom Tov, there's only 1 in the middle, and on the weekday, there's 13 in the middle. Now, the halacha is that if a person is davening on Shabbos or Yom Tov, and he by mistake starts bracha number 4, 5, 6, 7, any of the weekday brachas, and he realizes in the middle of whatever bracha he's in, let's say for the case at hand, in the middle of the bracha of Baruch Aleinu, he's like, whoops, it's Shabbos today, it's Yom Tov today, I'm not supposed to be saying this. So the halacha is that before he reverts back to the Atav V'Chartonu, which is the beginning of the Yom Tov Amida, or whatever, to the Shabbos Amida, whether it's Ma'ariv, Shachris, whatever it is. So then he, so you have to first finish the bracha that you're in the middle of. So you started Baruch Aleinu Hashem Elokeinu up, then suddenly you realize, hold on a second, I've just been spacing out. I'm supposed to be saying Atav V'Chartonu because it's Pesach tonight, right? So now you have to finish that bracha. So the question becomes, well, do you say V'sein telematter? On the one hand, we say V'sein telematter up till Pesach. We ask Hashem for rain up till Pesach. Now it's Pesach already. On the other hand, the congregation don't as a whole discontinue V'sein telematter until the first night of Chol HaMoed, which is the first opportunity for a weekday Shemina Esra, where I have the option of saying, where I say the bracha Baruch Aleinu, and I omit V'sein telematter. So he says that if a person erred on the first night of Pesach HaMa'ariv, and you prayed Shemina Esra of the weekdays, and you realized your error after you began Baruch Aleinu, then the law being that even having begun a bracha and error, you must complete the full bracha, but you don't add V'sein telematter, since the congregation also omits it. Right? So even though the congregation have not, so to speak, actively ceased saying V'sein telematter, but because in practice we're not saying it anymore, it's okay. Now, what about the other way? What about on the beginning end of a saying telematter. So let's say the saying telematter begins this year on Ma'ariv of December 4th. And this year, December 4th, that means on December 5th. And December 5th is a Shabbos. So we're not going to start saying the same telematter until the next day, until December 6th. But I'm davening on Shabbos, and I by mistake started a weekday Shemini Esrei, and I got up to Baruch Aleinu. So do I say the same telematter because at the end of the day it's already December 5th, or no? It happens to be December 5th, but this year we're delaying a day because today is Shabbos. So he says if the Shaila, that is the day that we begin to pray, falls on Shabbos, and by mistake you prayed the Amida of the week, then it also began Baruch Aleinu, you also do not say this on telematter, since the congregation has not yet started, and the individual always follows the congregation.
So you just say blessings?
Yes. All right. Any questions? Steve, you still with us?
I'm here. No questions.
Okay. Okay. If you forgot to add Yalav Yavah in Rosh Chodesh in the Shachris and Mincha service, or on Chol HaMoed in either Shachris, Mincha, or Ma'ariv, okay, because he's referencing the halacha that by Ma'ariv on Rosh Chodesh you would not repeat the Amida for forgetting Yalav Yavah, right? But if you forgot Yalav Yavah, so if you realized your error before you saying Yeh L'Ratz, you should go back to the beginning and begin with say. If you remembered before you started Moedim, as long as you have completed the Bracha Machzor Shechinaso L'Tzion, you must begin again with say, as we wrote above in regard to Mashav Aruch. And again, according to the Alter Rebbe, if you did not yet start Moedim, even if you finished Ritzei, you said Baruch Atah Hashem HaMachzor Shechinaso L'Tzion, you don't go back to Ritzei, you say Yalav Yavi right there, sandwiched in between Ritzei and Moedim, and only if you already started Moedim, then we say, okay, you have to go back to Ritzei. However, if you realize before completing the Bracha Machzor Shechinaso L'Tzion, you say it at the point where you realize, and then you conclude, you don't need to go back to the beginning of that Bracha. If you did not remember until after Yeh L'Ratz, you must go back to the beginning of the Amida. On Rosh Chodesh, if you forgot Yalav Yavah in the Ma'ariv Amida, whether Rosh Chodesh is 1 day or 2 days, once you already said Baruch Atah Hashem and you mentioned Hashem's name, you no longer need to go back to insert Yalav Yavah, but complete the Bracha Machzor Shechinaso L'Tzion and continue Shemini Esrei. The reason for this allowing for the completion of Shemini Esrei without Yalav Yavah is because Rosh Chodesh is not sanctified at night. That means that before there was an established calendar, Rosh Chodesh was sanctified by the Beis Din announcing that Mekudesh Hayom, that today is Rosh Chodesh, and that announcement was only made during the daytime. So the Ma'ariv of the night before was not really considered Rosh Chodesh, and therefore, even though nowadays we know that it's Rosh Chodesh and we say Yalav Yavi for Ma'ariv, but in a case of omission, we don't repeat. Now there is there's the next sif. The Alter Rebbe has a kula. If you forgot to say Yalav Yav in Rosh Chodesh or Chol HaMoed in Shachris, although you did not realize until after you prayed Musaf, whether you already mentioned Rosh Chodesh or the festival, nevertheless you are still required to repeat the prayers of Shachris. If the time for Shachris has passed, you may compensate it from at Mincha. And the Alter Rebbe disagrees with this. The Alter Rebbe holds that if a person forgot Yalav Yavai on Rosh Chodesh and he already davened Musaf, and the same is true on Chol HaMoed, so then once you've already davened Musaf, you don't need to go back and daven Shachris. It happens. I've been asked this question before. I davened Musaf, and then obviously if somebody asks a question before Musaf, so then they have to go and repeat Shachris. But if for whatever reason a person didn't ask the question or didn't realize, or whatever the case may be, then he doesn't need to repeat. Once he's already done Musaf, you don't repeat Shachris. And there's also, if the Chazan forgot Yalav Yavai. If the Chazan forgot Yalav Yavai in the repetition of Shachris, and everybody in the community was spacing out and nobody corrected him and said, no, snap the finger as Yalav Yavai, yeah? And then he finished the Amida. So you don't need to repeat the repetition because we could rely on the fact that he's going to daven Musaf, even though Even though for a private individual, we don't say rely on Musaf. You have to repeat. If you didn't realize until after Musaf, then you don't need to repeat. But for the Chazan, we'll allow him initially to rely on Musaf. Sifyud base. Whenever you must repeat the Shemoneh Esrei prayer, you are required to wait the time that it takes to walk 4 amas. So you take 3 steps back, you wait a few seconds, and then you start again. You don't do it instantly. Okay, if the Chazan ordering the silent Shemoneh Esrei, he does not repeat Shemoneh Esrei because it would be a burden on the congregation, he may rely on the prayer that he will pray aloud. Therefore, after you repeat Shemoneh Esrei, you should say the kind of prayer to take 3 steps back. But if you're in the 3 brachas, and the first 3 brachas and milas before you complete it, in a manner that his repetition will not constitute a burden of 1 second. In a manner that his repetition will not constitute a burden on the congregation, he should go back and repeat the Amida. So the point being that if he made, let's say the Chazan in his private Shemoneh Esrei forgot Ya'aleh V'Yaveh. So you don't say repeat the Amida quietly because you forgot Ya'aleh V'Yaveh and then do the repetition of the Amida loud for the congregation, because that would make everybody wait and everybody get antsy-pantsy. So instead we say rely on the repetition, and then of course usually after the Chazar Sashatz, the Chazan does not say that the final paragraph of the Amida. But in such a case where he's relying on this loud Amida to be his own personal prayer because he forgot Ya'aleh V'Yaveh, then he should say that and take 3 steps back. But if he made a mistake, let's say he forgot to say Mashav Ruach, and he remembered towards the beginning, and it's not going to be a big deal. If he repeats it now, it's not going to make everybody wait too much longer, then he should repeat it. Now, okay. Is that the end of the simon? Okay, one more sif. B'yom hatanis, on a fast day, whether communal fast day or a private individual fast day, we add anenu to the mincha prayer in the bracha of Shema Kalenu. After reciting the words b'chol yisrael of Tzukah, we conclude Ki'at Shemea. If you forgot to say anenu, you do not remember until after you said Baruch Atah Hashem of the bracha Shema Tefillah, you do not repeat the bracha to say anenu. But rather, after completing the entire Shemoneh Esrei, after the kind of tzor, before you move your feet, you should say the Anenu prayer until the closing words, B'chol Yisrael of Sukkah, and then conclude with Yehi L'Ratzain. And if you do not remember until after you move your feet back, you no longer say it. And then it brings that according to Alter Rebbe, you should say it before, after Bashalom, before the first Yehi L'Ratzain. At the end of the Amida, that's where you say Anenu if you forgot to say it on a fast day. Okay. We'll stop here and we'll do chapter 20 next week in Mitzvah Hashem.
Okay, thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you. See you, Steve.
Okay, take care.